Well, welcome back to Miles Driven. This time it is the Land Rover Freelander and Land Rover Discvoeyr Sport. We're going to go through all three generations of this vehicle, and I'll admit at the very beginning it's a bit of a favourite of mine because back in the late 90s my auntie bought one of these and it was the car that sort of got me interested in 4x4s. At the time, you have to remember, 4x4s were not that popular in the market. SUVs were starting to sort of pick up interest, but we don't get them until really the 2000s. So the Freelander is one of those standout models. Now, the L314 generation comes out in 1997. For the US, it will arrive in 2001. In late 2002, you'll get a facelift, and production ends in 2006. It's built in several different parts of the world. Obviously, the UK, South Africa also builds it. I think it's either one of the Asian countries, I can't remember off the top of my head, also build the car, and it's a 3-door or a 5-door. But by far and away, the biggest discussion that happens around these vehicles isn't the fact that it was the fastest selling and one of the best selling SUVs in Europe, 540,000 units sold. It's the engines, because depending on where you are in the world, will make a difference of what engine you got offered, and what engine you got offered really defines how people remember these cars. So if you're in Europe, you get 2 diesel engines. For the rest of the world, you may just have 1 petrol engine, possibly 2 petrol engines. In the UK, you get all 4 along with some other markets. I'm going to start with the petrol engines. It's a K-series engine, 1.8 inline 4 engine. This is the motor that today, it's so difficult. You know, you just walk straight into controversies with these. Basically, you have that or a 2.5 V6, and a lot of people dislike the 2.5 V6 somewhat fairly, particularly in the US. Your 2.5 V6 didn't have a great reputation from brand new, and because of that, people got very upset with the car when it was paired to its auto gearbox and everything else. And so in time, and for those countries that import used Freelanders, so a lot of sort of South America, Caribbean, Central America, parts of Asia that like to get sort of 5 to 10 year old vehicles, the K-series engine is where it is, and that's where people go for it, 1.8, because as much as it is known to have its issues, let's say, they're that generation of engines where if you've got a set of spanners at home, you can probably work on it yourself. The V6 is quite complex, and if it goes wrong, well, then things get wrong and they get expensive quickly. And unfortunately, where the market that engine was supposed to be most popular in is the market that dislikes it the most. So, you know, it's a difficult one when we talk about the petrols. By far and away, the engines that people prefer on these are the diesels, the L series diesel, and then the BMW diesel engine. If you've got a first generation and you could have it with a BMW diesel and a manual gearbox, people just don't have many complaints, to be honest. They run for a very long period of time. Yes, there are some issues, and there is a buyer's guide on this first generation for you to check out after the video in case you're looking at buying one. But if you had the 2-litre diesel, the L series is okay, but really once you step into the BMW one, you get modern power, sort of 140 horsepower. At the time, especially paired with the manual gearbox, it was, you know, you got to remember where we are, early 2000s. An SUV really wasn't keeping up with the traffic a lot of the time unless it was sort of a Range Rover with a V8 in it. So to have an engine where you could go fairly fuel efficient, go with the manual gearbox and not have to sort of wait for the old automatic to really get you moving through the gears. Yeah, unfortunately, it's left a bit of a legacy. 3 doors, people quite like the 3 doors, but you have to worry about sort of leaks and stuff like that coming from the roof. But if you get one and it's all in good shape, then it's a nice experience to have with the open back. Otherwise, the 5-door, as I say, the one you're just going to keep circling, if we're talking about the favourites on these, it's a 2-litre diesel, it's a manual gearbox. Now, if you're after the V6, the 2.5, don't let every single terrible report of them put you off, but be very aware of what you're buying. Okay, that's the fairest I can say for the V6. It's the most powerful engine. And if you know what you're buying, you know, I think a lot of the complaints with this is that people who bought them were expecting one thing, and unfortunately, they just didn't get it. And I feel that the whole world would have a different reliability view and memory of the Land Rover Freelander had everyone been offered the 2-litre BMW diesel engine in those later years, and that had been their option to go for. Unfortunately, some markets just don't like diesel, and because of that, well, there we are. But as I say, that to me really that sums up the first generation. If you're going to buy one today, I would look at one of the facelifts, the sort of 2003, 2004, and well, I've made it very clear which engine I'd go for. I will just mention that if you are in the US and you're looking at one of these early ones, sales really do are really hit in 2003 and 2002. So it's introduced 2001, 25,000 units go out the door. A fifth of that turn up in 2003, 2004. Like the market just disappears, and it's because there were a lot of issues with it's actually a KV6 engine. Okay, so it's K series V6, but it's just badged V6. So because of that, yeah, there's going to be not as much choice, and you need to be aware of what you're going for. A few other markets, similar situation, but for those of you that can, well, you know the pick. Let's move on to the second generation. This is the L539, sorry. This generation, there is a buyer's guide on the channel again, and it completely resets the problems of the first generation for the international markets. Okay, so that's you can't overstate what Land Rover managed to achieve in the second generation compared to the first when it comes to global sales as against European sales, predominantly because in the petrol engines, the SI6 motor, inline 6-cylinder engine that's shared with Volvo, along with an ASIN automatic gearbox comes in. ASIN, as some of you will know, is owned by Toyota, very reliable gearbox manufacturer. The SI6 engine, very reliable engine. Those two as a package in this generation just reset the thinking of Land Rover. And honestly today, if you go onto the forums and you say, I'm looking at an LR2, because it was renamed LR2 for this generation to try and detach the Freelander name in some markets, particularly in the USA. If someone says, I've got an SI6, you will not hear complaints unless they've got one, say with 250,000 miles on it, and they've started to run into just the problems you'd expect. For the majority of them, they will not have an issue, but I dig down deeper in that in the buyer's guide. So if you want to check that out, that's where to go for it. But I wanted to just give that redeeming sentence to Land Rover, because I think we have to remember when we're unkind to manufacturers because of reliability or because they bring out a product that is subpar, and I'm not defending them. The Freelander, when it went to the US, was subpar because of the engine. The knock-on effect that it has isn't always the manufacturer's fault directly. A lot of the time, manufacturers have to jump through a lot of hoops with regulations and with assuming what the market will be, and they don't always get that call right. And that's why in Europe, the first Freelander is so popular, and the second Freelander is so popular. And the big shift here is we go over to Ford ownership of Land Rover. That's actually happened during the first generation model, but that sort of shift away from BMW engines, things like that, doesn't happen because Ford haven't sort of fully taken on ownership and development of the future models until really the Land Rover 2 or the Freelander 2. Because of that, it's a host of Ford engines. I've mentioned the Volvo engine. As you'll know at the time, or as you may know, Volvo also owned Ford. That's why cars like the Ford Focus, Volvo C30 are built on the same platform, and why under a lot of Volvo cars, Ford cars, JLR cars, you'll have similar chassis throughout these years. Because of that, Land Rover get the 2-litre EcoBoost engine, and they get the 2.2 duratorq diesel engine. And it's funny because the second generation, compared to the first generation and what people have known, as I say, depending on where you are in the world, the first generation, people either love it or hate it kind of thing. But in the second generation, I think a lot of the criticism that Land Rover get directed at it from people on the internet particularly, you'll find a comment somewhere below at some point after this video has gone out, someone saying, oh, they're all rubbish, they all break, blah, blah, blah. There's always someone. And actually, it's unfair when you look at the LR2 or the Freelander 2 model, because for the most part, the diesel engines, fairly rock solid, do have a few issues, but nothing that you shouldn't be able to sort out with good maintenance. The 2-litre turbo engine, it's not my favourite for this. I would go for the SI6. It wasn't offered in a lot of markets, that turbo 2-litre engine, but actually, it's a pretty good engine. It works, it does the job, and for off-roading, it gives the torque fill where it's needed. It's not a diesel, okay? ultimately in this, we have a separation happening. In the first generation, you see a lot of manual car buyers, and Land Rover are a bit slow to really get on the idea of we need to get a good auto gearbox in. That will secure world markets, because while Europeans are happy to have a manual, a lot of the world has shifted and they just do not want manual gearboxes. They want autos. They didn't really get that right on the first generation. They get it right in the second generation. Okay, but the manual is perfectly good, and they sold lots of them. And if you want a manual, you can have it, and there's no real known faults with them either. So my pick of the bunch on this, SI6 with an auto gearbox. However, if that's a bit too thirsty for you on fuel economy, you can go for the duratorq engine. You can check out the buyer's guide. There's a few details that I note in there, things to be aware of. But generally speaking, if you take care of them, they'll take care of you. We do step over into Euro 5 emissions in this generation. So 2006 they come out. They run until about 2013. Sorry, not Euro 6, Euro 5 emissions about 2007, 2008. Because of that, the diesel engines will have additional filters, DPFs, put on them, and there is a reliability factor that goes with that. So just bear in mind, if it's not had its DPF changed and it's got one fitted, you probably should look at paying out and getting it replaced, because it's going to have to be done at some point. So just a side note and a warning there. Manual or auto, it's Getrag manual gearbox, and it's an Aisin automatic gearbox. Both those manufacturers very good at what they do, so I wouldn't push either way. That's the end of the second generation. Let's move on to complete renaming of the model, the Discvoeyr Sport. Now this is coded L550, comes out in 2014, is still on sale today. I will mention something, I'm going to put a little asterisk next to it. So this is the best selling Land Rover model since 2017. But so you've got to put a bit of an asterisk. Technically, since that point, the only Land Rover model was the Discvoeyr. The Defender was being phased out in 2016, and then it had a 4-year gap where it's this. The Discvoeyr 5 comes out in 2017, and of course you've got one that's sort of the cheaper version, the expensive version. You'd expect the Discvoeyr Sport to sell better, sell more. And then in 2020 or 2019 to 2020, we get the new Defender model, and that starts ramping up sales. But this car has been out for a lot longer, so it holds that title of best-selling Land Rover. Let's say it's a little bit, there's only 3 Land Rovers at this point. And for the majority of the time the Discvoeyr Sport has been on sale, there are only 2 Land Rovers, because one of them, I say actually that's unfair. There wasn't. Oh yeah, there was for the majority, because the Defender comes off sale so soon after the this model comes out. And obviously we have a Range Rover Vogue, Range Rover Velar, Range Rover Sport, and full-size Range Rover. And so the brand really shifts to selling Range Rovers, whereas the Land Rover brand technically previously used to brand up Range Rovers as Land Rover Range Rover. They stopped doing that. They take off the Land Rover badges from 2013. Once we move into the L405 generation, everything is then branded Range Rover, not Land Rover Range Rover. That may all be a bit technical, but I thought worth mentioning, because I don't want to say something and then, you haven't got all the caveats to go with it. This is one of the first cars I know that has a technical change of chassis. So it starts off on the JLR D8 platform, then goes to the PTA platform when it's facelifted. The PTA platform being a revision of the D8 platform, in itself a revision of the previous platform that was under the Freelander, which is the EUCD platform. If all that is a bit technical for you, you'll hear this comment, and it's unfair that a Freelander and a Mondeo use the same platform. So in the 2000s, as Ford come into the picture of owning Land Rover, there's this modular platform idea where you can adjust one platform to sort of vary depending on size and depending on usage. Okay. And in the Freelander, you get the off-road version. I believe the XC60 also gets the same version. Could be wrong on that one, but I'm pretty sure it definitely has the same platform. If it has the off-road version or not, I'm pretty sure it does, but I could be wrong. It's pretty detached. And especially once you're into Discvoeyr Sport and you're on the JLR PTA platform, in the facelifted Discvoeyr Sport, the much later one, you know, yeah, there's a few bits of metal that you could sort of say, oh, that shape, yeah, all that, yeah, that's come off, and you can kind of align it with a Mondeo, but you couldn't sort of cut the top half of a Mondeo off and slide it under the top half of a Freelander and or a Discvoeyr Sport and weld them together. Just wouldn't work. So yes, but you know, in the same way you could say several of the larger Volvos share the chassis with the XC90. The XC90 is an SUV, so it is adapted. The Mercedes E-Class and S-Class have a very similar chassis put underneath them now. You know, it's just modular designing of chassis. So they are different. They do come from the same sort of well of an idea, put it that way, but they are different. So I just wanted to give them fairness. Let's say there is a buyer's guide on this one if you want a few more details on that. Now, engines. So let's separate out the early models from the later models, because we're going to start talking about Ingenium in a moment. And anytime I bring up Ingenium engines, it just sparks this wild lot of comments, and I have to be very careful to make sure that I get the details right. But I think the Ingenium engine is very unfairly judged, but I'll come on to it, because in some ways it's fairly judged, but in other ways it's not. So let's talk about the early engines. 2-litre EcoBoost petrol engine and a 2.2 duratorq engine. So the duratorq diesel engine from the previous generation is getting its sort of revised but newer version, but it's coming along for the ride into this generation. People that own that car love it. It's not as powerful as some new diesel engines, but ultimately it's reliable, does the job, you service it, and they just keep running. The same can be said for the 2-litre EcoBoost engine. Okay, it's not so popular in a lot of Europe. Really, that engine is kind of meant more for the world. The diesel engine is the popular engine, but we're going to see a shift in 2018 here, and I'll come on to that in just a moment with the Ingeniums. But for the early engines, if you can get a 2.2 duratorq engine, you're going to be happy with it. Okay, that diesel engine, it's not as powerful as the later Ingenium diesel. However, the following behind it is pretty strong. I should make it very clear. I probably confused it a little bit. Let's just talk about diesels for a second. You only get this engine for 2013, 14, 15, and then it is dropped because Euro 6 emissions come in, and the diesel Ingenium engine comes in for sort of 15, 16, 17. I'm really going to talk about it from 18, but that's the split. So if you're 13, 14, 15, you should be able to get, I mean, it'll be obvious. If it's a 2.2 diesel, it's a duratorq. If it's a 2-litre, it's an Ingenium. Okay, so if you hate the idea of the Ingenium diesel and you want a Discvoeyr Sport, 2.2 diesel, that's the one you want. Over on the petrols, people like the EcoBoost 2-litre. People don't report loads of problems with them, so it's in the guide. If you're looking at an early car and you're between the petrol and the diesel, I'd just say drive them both, because there isn't necessarily a reliability issue like we've had on some of the earlier generations where you can say, this one is the one for reliability. It's really, which one did you get offered? Which one have you got more supply of? Which one would you prefer? A turbo petrol engine, a turbocharged diesel engine? That's you up until 2015. Now the petrol engine, the EcoBoost, will carry on in 15, 16, 17 in some markets. Some will have it removed from the lineup entirely, and the 2-litre Ingenium engine will come in. And 2015, 16, 17 and 18, the diesel engine has a lot of problems. It's widely talked about on the internet. You don't need me to add to it. But if you've heard of Ingeniums having bad reputations, it's because of the 2015, 16, 17 and 18 engine. My feeling on it is that Euro 6 was being brought in. I think that Euro 6 emission laws were, I don't think they were rushed in, but I think they took manufacturers a little bit by surprise, and that's no excuse because other manufacturers managed to get the right engine out at the right time. But I think for Land Rover, possibly they get caught out knowing that they had the engine they wanted, but they needed some more development time. And ultimately, the engine they put in 2015, 16, 17, 18 in the diesel, for me, it wasn't right. It just, whether it needed more development time, whatever it may be, these are known for timing chain issues. They're known for turbo issues. They're known for oil starvation issues. There's just a heap of issues that they are known for. They cost people a lot of money. And if you're buying in that era, 15 to 18, and you're buying the diesel, you need to get a warranty. It's as simple as that. I wouldn't look at owning one without one. Okay, that's me being honest and straight with you. However, you will hear tons of criticism of the 2-litre diesel from 2019 onwards. These people are either been very unfortunate, okay, or they are just they're unable to differentiate when there's a revision to this engine. So in 2018, the petrol Ingenium comes out, goes into the F-Type, goes into the XF, goes into some of the other Jaguars, goes into this model, goes into the Range Rover in the hybrid form, goes into the Range Rover Sport in hybrid form, goes into the Velar as well, goes into the Discovery. So it just all across the Jaguar and Land Rover fleet. And the petrol engine, 2-litre Ingenium, has a few issues in the first 6 months. After that, it's quite rare to hear problems. Are they perfect engines that will never have a timing chain issue? No. You can hear of them, but I'd say after, particularly 2019 onwards, if you get a timing chain issue or a turbo issue on an Ingenium engine, you've been very unlucky. Okay, and it possibly will have something to do with how the engine was kept when it was brand new. Try and find one that had an owner that didn't listen to Land Rover servicing recommendations. They were too long from factory. I think it was 20,000 miles. That was to appease lease companies and everything else. You want 10,000 mile servicing. I would say 8 to 12, to be fair. 8 to 12,000 mile servicing on the petrol engine. It should be fine. People that say the petrol engine from 2019 onwards breaks, I don't know what land they're living in. I think they have either been very, very unlucky and they're just commenting everywhere online, and I feel for them, and I think that's a genuine issue to face. But I see a lot of people just jumping on there. And when I was researching for a recent video for the Defender, I actually found people who were going to mechanics, and mechanics were saying, oh yeah, this engine always breaks, it's terrible, you should never buy it. And I thought that person has never ever seen one. They couldn't have. Because it's not like, go to F-Type owners and say, hi, you absolutely ragged the nuts off of your F-Type with a 2-litre engine. How many problems have you had? You don't see forum posts in the F-Type, the XE, the XF community saying, oh yeah, their Ingenium 2-litre petrol is breaking all the time. You hear it on a few Land Rover forums, and they've either been unfortunate, as I say, the first 6 months, I would probably avoid, but particularly 2019, that petrol Ingenium, people are unfair to it. And people can say what they want. I'm not paid to say that. That's personal experience. That's from understanding the heavy revision that went through on the Ingenium engines in 2018, going into 2019. On the diesel side, as I say, when people are talking about the petrol engine, for me, I can say, no, you're off the mark. Okay, you're talking about something that it just doesn't really happen. The diesel engine, there's like oil dilution issues, there's things like that are not completely resolved in 2018 going into 2019. However, my warning on the earlier ones, 15, 16, 17, 18, don't own them without a warranty. I'd still say get a warranty after that, but it's not as imperative. Okay, they have quite a big revision. They shouldn't have timing chain issues. They may suffer oil dilution. The way around that is to make sure you're doing longer journeys and to make sure that you are servicing the car 6 to 12,000 miles. Okay, if you want to own one of those in a diesel engine, I'd just cut the servicing short. You just shouldn't have a problem. Honestly, people are talking about 2020 and 2021 and 2022 2-litre diesel Ingeniums being as bad as 2015. Either just missed the memo that there's been quite a heavy revision in 2018, or just don't want to hear it. Okay. However, my view, the 1.5 petrol engine also comes in with a hybrid system, a P300 model, around 2020. And if efficiency is hugely important to you and you can get a nice long warranty on your battery pack, I would go and have a drive of one of those, especially if you're a diehard diesel fan of the early ones. Go and see if the hybrid will suit your needs. Okay, it's highly efficient. If you can keep it charged up, you'll make tons of savings on fuel. especially if you've got like a cheap tariff system where you can, charge up overnight and not face some of the issues. If you can't, look at the diesel engine, get a warranty on it. I wouldn't look 15 to 18. I agree with people that have had issues at that time. They had problems, okay? There are ones from there that have had fixes done, that have had later revision parts put in them. They should be a lot better, but I'd still want a warranty. 2019 onwards, I'm less worried. But would I want one? No, I'd want the petrol. That's my view of it. I would just take up the idea of I'm going to have less fuel efficient engines. I'm going to have a less fuel efficient engine, but the 2 litre petrol does the job, especially in the Discvoeyr Sport, and so that would be my pick. They also have less issues reported with them, apart from people that seem to think that they're all breaking, and that's just because they've attached the word Ingenium to everything that breaks. Okay, that is the whole lineup. Okay, that's all of the Discvoeyr Sports, the Freelanders, and the Freelander 1. And the one thing I would say about this car is it's been hugely popular. It brought in a lot of new customers to Land Rover, and if you've made it this far to the video, you'll know that that doesn't always help a brand out. When a brand isn't known, they're not like Toyota. Toyota have actually had some more recent reliability issues, but ultimately Toyota are known for reliability, Land Rover are not. And so when you bring in new buyers and you let them down very quickly, they took a risk on you. They heard you weren't that reliable from so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. They bought the car and then it was unreliable. People who are stung once are not coming back. And unfortunately, I see it in the comments section, and I do feel for people if they've had an issue, because they've sort of gone into a brand they've heard not the greatest things about. Many of you watching will have had your Land Rover, run it for hundreds of thousands of miles across generations and never had an issue. Okay, but you're the silent majority there. The unfortunate thing is that people who have a problem, it usually costs them a lot of money, and I can completely understand why they then get very loud online. And I try and give people that sort of leeway in the buyer's guides. This is what you need to know. If you're still happy with that, go for one. I've tried to be a bit clear on the Discvoeyr Sport. Be aware, okay, of everything I've told you. If reliability is number one, it's key, buy a 2013 to 2015 2.2 diesel and run it to the moon and back, or buy a 2 litre turbo petrol and run it to the moon and back, and you'll be absolutely fine. Okay, 2015 onwards, depending on the market, you may still be able to buy the 2 litre turbo ecoboost, you may not. I'd wait then for the 2 litre Ingenium, or I'd go and have a look at that 1.5 hybrid. And if I was looking brand new, 24, 25, 23, I'd probably still want to look at that hybrid. Is it the perfect engine? No. Do people have a lot of issues with it? Not particularly. And if you're looking at keeping it on a 3-year lease and you haven't got to worry about battery issues in the future, if there are any, then you may just find that it was the best Land Rover you've ever owned. Maybe you won't, but hey, there we are. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, I shall catch you in the next one. Consider subscribing and liking the video. But otherwise, have a great day. See you soon.